What's up guys, Ian Sandusky from Lakewood Machine and Tool back here again for Practical Machinist. Today on Shop Talk, we're going to be going through some questions that come up, like the ethics of automation and some practical tips for starting your own machine shop. Before we do that, make sure you like and subscribe below if you want to see more videos. Let's get into it. Okay guys, so today on Shop Talk, we're going to be going back through the forums and picking out some conversations that we thought were interesting. The reason I've been doing a lot of these lately, guys, is I find it very, very interesting. I mean, it's one thing to hear my opinion on things. You know, obviously, guys, I love talking about this stuff and having discussions. But the one thing that's really cool about the Practical Machinist forums is not only are you getting my opinion on things, but you're getting the opinion of guys who have been in the trade forever. You're getting guys who are new to the trade. You are getting, you know, shop owners, you're getting shop foremen, you're getting all of their opinions in one place. And that's one of the reasons why the Practical Machinist forum is so interesting and so helpful, is that it is kind of a repository of knowledge. So when we go through and talk about these different threads on there and link them, it gives you a chance to go see not only, you know, what I'm talking about in the video, but you can go and actually engage in the conversation yourself or see, you know, some of the more in-depth comments on there, because these guys love to share their knowledge. So to be able to go in and tap into that is really, really helpful. So I highly recommend, guys, that although we're gonna link them here and talk about them, you do click on the links and go check them out. And guys, go start some threads, have some conversations. It's fantastic, fantastic resource. So I really hope you guys are using it. That's why I keep hammering on it so hard, okay? So the first one we're gonna talk about today was an interesting question. We'll link it here. That was a thread on the ethics of automation. Specifically, in my opinion, this was talking about, I mean, they didn't specify particularly, but when we're talking about automation, we're not just talking about, you know, the automation of a CNC machine. We're talking about cell automation or automation lines. So, you know, a cobot loading and unloading a machine, or a full manufacturing cell where it's completely robotically loaded, has an in feed for your material and an out feed for your finished parts. We're talking about the real automation stuff that, you know, some of our smaller shops like me haven't really gotten into, but, you know, is becoming more prevalent. And there have been a lot of conversations on automation and the practicality of it. I've definitely seen a lot of conversations on that, and, you know, I've been in them myself. But this one was interesting because it was specifically about the ethics of automation. And to preclude this, guys, when it comes to ethics, especially in business, these are big, broad questions, and it's a whole area of study itself. I would argue there is no right answer. It's a lot of shades of gray. But the reason it was interesting is this individual was asking, what are the ethics when it comes to business of automation as it relates to the manufacturing trades? And they started out by listing a few pros and cons. The first pro was that it can help eliminate repetitive and tedious tasks, which is definitely true. One of the biggest pros when it comes to having automation cells is that it gets rid of the jobs that no one wants to do. You know, it can sit there and load and unload a machine day in, day out. You know, have you ever seen lights out machining facilities where literally you can turn the lights out in the shop? That's why they call them lights out machining, because there's no one working there that has eyes. And that doesn't mean a place full of blind people. It means that it's full of robots. It works the same whether someone is there, whether someone is not. It takes over those repetitive tasks that, you know, it's the whole jobs people don't want to do argument. And that is definitely a pro. Another pro is that it increases efficiency. You know, at the end of the day, guys, the machine's not going to be sitting there checking their Instagram while the machine's running. For better or for worse, the machine, once you get it up to task, for certain tasks, is going to be more efficient. If we're just talking from a pro, let's not get into the shades of gray of that. A machine is more efficient than a person, period. The third pro is that it's an alternative to offshoring. And this has been a massive conversation since as long as I've been in the trade. Offshoring, when it comes to North American manufacturing, it came close to destroying us. We've definitely bounced back. That's another conversation. But helping bring automation in is a good alternative in some cases to offshoring, because once you're set up, it can help you meet the price points. Instead of having to pay an operator, you pay a one-time setup for a machine. Helps bring your cost per part down, which can help keep work here. Of course, for every pro, there's a con. The cons they listed were that it eliminates entry-level positions. Now, I'm not going to get too into these here because we are going to discuss them, but it does eliminate entry-level positions. in a direct relation to that first pro. It does the work that no one else wants to do. Guess who did that traditionally? Apprentices, operators, guys who are getting into the trade. We don't have a machine, well, I guess we do, we have Roombas, but we don't have a machine that can sweep the floors yet. But sweeping floors for an apprentice does not teach them anything besides how to work. That doesn't teach them anything about the trade. Loading and unloading machines, although it may seem repetitive and small, is hands on a machine. It's getting to tighten vices. It's, learning for when tools break. Simple operator entry-level jobs are the entry position into getting into the trade. If we eliminate those by automation, what do we do with apprentices? Do we just throw them straight into programming and stuff? Sure, but I mean, that's a whole other kettle of worms. The apprentices start in a position for a reason. So that's a con. Another con is that it removes humans from the floor. Like I said, with lights out machining, you don't need a human on the floor. It's all good and fine to say, oh, the machine runs completely by itself, the whole floor runs by itself. The con of that is there's no one monitoring it. Guys, machines are not perfect. Tool breaks, the tool detection doesn't catch it for whatever reason, you could have a huge run of parts that are no good. You don't have someone walking the floor making sure that there's no funny sounds, that a fan's not about to go on a machine and end up frying the circuit boards. You don't have a guy walking around making sure that, with as much intensity, that everything's getting done the way it should. It definitely does remove people from the floor, and that's a big con. On top of that, it takes away jobs, because if there's no guys walking the floor, we don't need to pay someone to walk the floor. And if you're paying a guy just to walk the floor and not actually as a machinist, it kind of defeats the purpose of automation. Like I said, a whole different kettle of fish. The third con is that it puts control in the hands of the few. This is definitely something that I have a issue with, and I'll get into this a little bit after we talk about some of the comments that were on there. But it really consolidates things. Let's not get into worker and the means of production and all that fun argument. But the issue is that it consolidates things. If you can run a shop with 3 guys instead of where it used to have 30, those 3 guys have a lot more control. The one guy at the top gets a lot more profit for a lot less, there's a lot less distribution of profit that way. A lot less people get their livelihoods out of it. For better or for worse, it's a con for somebody, right? It's great for the people who own the machines and the automation. Not so great for the guys on the floor. So anyways, guys, it was a really interesting discussion. Like I said, this was a bit of an ethics discussion, and a lot of guys kind of went more into the practicality of it, which is a great discussion, but I mean, we've had it a million times before. So I'm gonna try to stay away from that. But the comments basically were saying that everybody agreed that it's happening. We can't put the genie back in the bottle. Like it or not, automation is coming. It's been coming for years. It's getting more and more prevalent. Smaller shops are getting into automation. It's coming. And if you do not do it, you are going to get your lunch eaten, because although you may have an issue with it, someone else is not going to. They're going to be able to hit prices you can't and efficiency you can't. Bing, bang, boom, your job's gone. So, I mean, it was kind of a bit of a nihilistic situation where people said, it's coming, so why are we even debating this? Because it's just the way the trade is going. There was a general feeling, and this was interesting, of unease, especially around guys who were implementing this kind of stuff, that everybody kind of felt like, we're getting rid of people's jobs doing this, but I have to do it, but I don't like it, but I want automation. It was a really weird feeling of, nobody felt super comfortable with it. I mean, there were guys there just, swinging from the rafters, screaming about how great automation was, but there was a lot more comments talking about how, it's a feeling of unease, that they know, it's almost like they're doing something wrong, but they have to do it. So that was interesting. I highly recommend checking out those comments, because that's a feeling I feel we all have at certain points when it comes to automation. You're automating away someone's job, so how do I feel about that? If you're not the guy who's taking profits, does that make you feel great? Do you accept that as a part of the world? Interesting question. As another guy put it, this is a really, really good comment. If you want to get rid of automation and create more jobs, get rid of backhoes and give guys shovels. I thought that was a great illustrative point, because, you know what? We can get rid of these nice shiny CNC machines and give guys manual mills again. It'll create jobs. Will it create efficiency? No. Will it create competitiveness? No. You're never gonna get everybody to agree to it, and why would you? My thoughts on it were that to be against automation is to be against CNC machining in general. I wasn't around when the big CNC revolution came. You know, I was in the shop. I remember the year we got our first CNC machine, but I was very young. I was not working here. I'm sure the same kind of conversation happened between manual machinists and, you know, the guys getting into CNC, because like I've said before in my videos, guys, here at Lakewood Machine and Tool, we had 10 or 15 10 or 15 manual mills at one point, and a trained, you know, ticketed machinist at every manual mill. Now we put out probably 10 times the work. We have about a third of the guys, and we have, you know, 7 or 8 CNC machines. It's a big difference. That same conversation I'm sure happened, you know, when we talk about the skills gap. It's not just that, you know, we are losing guys not coming into the trade, but we lost guys going out of the trade because the job pool shrank. You don't need as many machinists to run CNC machines. And going forward, you know, do you need as many CNC machinists to run a shop with automation? Again, guys, I don't have the answer for this. This is a business ethics question that is up for debate. So I hope you guys weigh in on this in the comments below. The other big thing with my concern in relation to the ethics of it is that it increases the barrier to entry for new shops. You know, back in the day when it was all manual, you could put a manual mill in your garage, you could put a manual lathe in your garage, and you may not be able to compete on the economy of scales with guys, but you know, your startup cost was X. Then when CNC came in, now you gotta get your garage wired up for, you know, higher amperages, you gotta buy a CNC machine, you gotta buy software to program it, you gotta buy an air compressor to run the machine. The barrier to entry went up. So now it's harder to compete. Now, if we're getting into automation and all of a sudden, let's say, you know, in a year from now, everybody needs automation in order to compete. CNC machines are just part of that equation. Now the barrier to entry is even higher, because now you need to have automation on top of a CNC machine, on top of an air compressor, on top of better wiring, on top of the space to do it, on top of the software to program it all. The barrier to entry to guys trying to start their own shops just goes through the roof. And the problem is, to me, that's going to continue to consolidate what's going on at fewer and fewer shops. And the fewer shops and the fewer diversification we have of that, you know, that's wage stagnation. That's, you know, if one shop goes under, that's a huge dent to manufacturing in that area. You know, the more space we can have making, the more spaces we can have making things, the better. Competition is good, end of the day. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, guys. You know, as I said about 8 times during this is not a black and white question. I'd love to know your thoughts on automation below. Are you doing it at your shop? Are you a small shop like me who's struggling with trying to get it going? You know, the highest level of automation we have here is we have a bar puller on my lathe. You know, we're trying to think of a good way to do it, but as a job shop, it's still been difficult to implement. So are you guys doing it at your shop? Are you, you know, considering it? What are your barriers to entry? And also, guys, what is your thought on the ethics of this? You know, what do you think? Is it gonna get rid of jobs? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I'm not sure, but in any case, guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts below. The next post that I really wanted to talk about, and I thought this was a fantastic thread because I love case studies. Love, love, love case studies, guys. You know, anecdotal evidence is only as good as the anecdote, I guess. But when it comes to case studies like this and guys willing to share their experience on starting a shop, I think they're fantastic. I wish we had more of this. So guys, if you've started a shop, please share a post like this. I love to read them. So this guy, I believe he started a company called Torch something. We'll link it there above. My apologies to the author of this thread. But essentially, he started a shop by himself. One-man show for the first 3 years, it sounded like. Got to 1 million in sales in the first 3 years. And as far as I could tell, he made a video on it, but as far as I could tell, that's when he actually started to expand. Crazy, absolutely crazy. And this guy went through and put out a list of questions and points you should consider if you were gonna start a shop based on his experience. This was really, really handy. We're gonna go through, he went through and posted a bunch of questions and points to ask yourself or consider before you start a shop. I'm gonna go through them point by point because I thought they were fantastic. Again, guys, make sure you check this out. So the first point he had when you're opening a shop, and you know, this is all based on his experience, is don't quit your day job. I agree with this point. The reason for this is, if you're starting a shop, guys, you know, guys, stuff happens. I don't want to go into the stats of how many shops fail within the first year or how many startup companies fail, but the proportion is high. Not quitting your day job not only gives you a fallback, but it gives you a way to finance your business while you have it going. Essentially, it's somebody subsidizing your paycheck while you turn a side hustle into your main hustle. I think that it's romantic to quit your day job and say, you know what, I'm starting this shop, it's do or die, I'm gonna succeed or fail, I'm all in. Very, very romantic notion. It's also a lot of pressure that you do not have to put on yourself, and I don't know why people do it. Some people operate like this, I get it. I think, and I agree with him, that keeping your job or a steady paycheck as long as you can is going to be essential for the success of your job, because it lets you, or your job, for the success of your shop, because it lets you weather the little storms and hiccups that come when you start. Like I said in a previous video, guys, when my old man started this shop in '88, the first 3 years, he pulled less than a 4-figure annual paycheck out of this place. Startup companies do not make money for a while. So being able to make money and support yourself and your family if you have one, pay your bills, is going to be essential. The next point he had was work from home until you can. Excuse me. I think this is a fantastic point. Guys, if you live in an apartment, I know the answer to this is, well, how can I do that? I can't put a desktop CNC in my apartment. Maybe that means that instead of going out and buying a shop outright and buying a location, you move to a place that has a big garage. Maybe you have family members who have space that they can loan you or whatever it may be, but trying to keep your overhead basically to nothing above your normal overhead of living is going to be essential, because it keeps your costs down and it keeps you from putting bills on top of yourself and pressure to get money coming in the door consistently. Otherwise you have to shutter for as long as possible. I definitely agree with this point. I believe this guy puts together, or at least he was putting together at first, DIY CNC kits for plasma tables. So for him, it was a lot of buying off the shelf parts and assembling and selling kits that way, which is something you can do from home. Obviously, this is something not everybody can do from home, but I thought it was a very good point. Try to keep working where you are from home as long as you can, if practical. The third point was rent, do not buy your commercial space. Personally, this is where I disagree. Other people in the comments disagreed as well. I feel like his point and the reason he said this was because when he started to expand, he went from a shop that was, say, 5,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet to 100,000 square feet within 3 years. And if he had to go buy each of those shops, his outset would have been so high, and the money he had to put into that would have been so high that it wouldn't have been tenable. Personally, I disagree with this. I know particular case studies of certain shops in my area who, every time they walk in on the first of the month, they turn on the lights, they owe $30,000 to their landlord. At the end of the day, when they leave or if they go to a new shop, they have nothing to show for that money. It's kind of like renting a house versus owning. There is a practical reason to do this if you have the reason, if you get a smoking deal on a rental property. His argument, of course, if you feel you're going to be expanding extremely quickly, I get it. Personally, I've made videos on this before, but I feel you should always own your shop, because at the end of the day, that's something no one can take from you. Put it in a holding company, so if your shop gets sued, it's a completely separate entity. And at the end of the day, it's building equity instead of just giving someone else and making someone else rich for your work, right? I don't like working for a landlord, but that's my thought anyway. The fourth point, and I fully agree with this one, is do not borrow if you can avoid it for your startup. Do not borrow seed money. Do not get a loan to start your company. It kind of relates to his whole theory, and I agree with it, that you should try to keep your costs as low as possible on the outset so you can see if it's going to work. Putting yourself in a situation where you have to pay back a loan, putting the pressure that in 2 years you have $100,000 due on top of all your operating costs. Always try to start as small as possible. Start with one CNC machine and see where you get. Put it in your garage. You don't need to go buy a top of the line, DMG Mori for $1.5 million just to start competing out there in the workplace or in the work environment. You can get by with very little for a long time, and being able to feel it out without spending a ton of money, especially that isn't yours, is going to be the optimal situation. Sometimes it's not always feasible, no, but again, guys, these are just kind of points for best practices in that regard, so I definitely do agree with that one. The fifth point was take care in selecting your product. This guy, as mentioned, was a product-focused, retail-y, warehousey type of guy. You know, he put together kits for CNC machines, as I mentioned. So for him, he wanted to basically sell a product. Me, I'm a job shop. We don't have a product. We've tried to do it over the years, multiple times. Whole nother conversation. But his theory on this, and I thought it was a great one, was try to select the most expensive product you can to sell. The reason for that is that it costs just as much to warehouse, package, all the administrative stuff, ship cheap parts as it does expensive parts. So unless you're doing a job or a product where you're gonna sell a lot, like proven a lot of a cheap part, it's better to go for something where you don't need to make 10,000 sales a month in order to break even and make money. Maybe you can get a product where you sell 10 and you're doing good. It takes the pressure off moving large quantities of things just to cover your overhead. I thought that was a great point. I don't have a lot of experience with it because we're not a product shop. You know, we don't sell work holding, we don't sell whatever. We do jobs for customers. But I thought it was an interesting point. The sixth one was one man or woman can only do one person's work. This was a very good one because I find this applies to a lot of guys in their shops, especially when you're trying to expand. You can only do so much yourself. Hiring on 2 guys can only do 2 guys' work. Yeah, you might get an awesome guy who can do the work of 3 men for a bit, but you're gonna burn them out. The point is that you have to know when it's time to scale. You have to know when it's time to, you know, this guy was saying, for a while there, he was trying to do everything himself in terms of building the parts for his machines. It turned out to be better use of his time, because, you know, it takes him away from doing it, to buy parts off the shelf as much as he could. Therefore, it gave him more time to focus on selling, developing the business, marketing. I found it really interesting because, you know, there's a big pushback against outsourcing. We want to do everything ourselves, but when you're building a business, being able to outsource, you know, maybe you outsource some of your work to another shop. Maybe you hire on an extra guy. Maybe you buy some off-the-shelf things because it's good enough for what you're doing until you can get to a spot where you're doing it all in-house again. They're all very salient points about not burning yourself out, stretching yourself too thin, and then all of a sudden, you know, you are the admin person, you are the machinist, you are the shipper, and nothing is getting done. So, interesting point. After that, he went into some basic things about sales and marketing, which I won't touch on here. It's good advice. I recommend you go check out the thread. And then, you know, he did talk about that there's been some big changes in market. I believe he got into the business in the mid-90s, early 2000s. So, you know, he talks about how the rise of social media has really changed things, YouTube. Interesting to read about, not so interesting to discuss here. So I'll let you guys go check it out. There were some interesting comments on there. One of the big ones I found that was very, very salient was, new hires will not be you. One of the things that a lot of guys struggle with when they're starting a business, when they're starting to hire, is that they hire people and they go, how come he can't keep 10 machines running at once and work through his lunch and work 7 days a week? You know, that's what I did. Guys, if they don't own the company, they're not you. They're not gonna work as hard as you. There's a lot of great workers out there, but they don't have the same skin in the game that you do. Making sure your expectations are correct and not too high for people when you hire them is important. You want to hire people with good work ethic, but realizing that when you're hiring, you know, you may need to hire 2 people to replace you when you're trying to remove yourself from, you know, the floor, because guys are not going to work as hard as you if it's not their company. For them, it's a job, and that's okay. So keeping that in mind, I thought that was a very good point. There was a lot of belly aching I found too, which was interesting, about people complaining that, oh, this guy was just in the right place, right time. You know, he popped up right when the internet was getting big and no one else, you know, there wasn't competition from China on this. It was a right time, right place, right time scenario, and this can never be replicated. And the guy said himself, you know, yeah, that's true. My comment on this, guys, is that every business is a right place, right time scenario. Discounting other people's success by saying, you know, yeah, you got that contract because, oh, you just happened to be there when this company went out of business. Is it true? Yeah. But the fact was that that guy was there to answer the phone when that call came. Or, you know, did that guy capitalize on Instagram when it came out? Yeah. But the fact was he was around before Instagram and was there with a product to sell. You know, it's cliche, but they say that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And I think that's very important to remember, because there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. There's a lot of luck. But just discounting other people's success strictly on luck, I think is not helpful, and I don't think it teaches you anything. I think it's a lot of sour grapes. So let's try to be positive about other people's success moving forward. I'd like to hear your tips below, guys of you who have opened shops, and guys who are thinking about opening shops, or maybe who have just opened. I'd like to hear some of the challenges, or, you know, as we mentioned previously, the barriers to entry that you're facing in the comments below, because I find this very interesting. And you know, if we can help each other get new shops off the ground and help new startups start, I think it's going to help everybody in the long run. Thank you very much for watching, guys. As always, make sure you like and subscribe if you want to see more videos. You take care.